bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee. David Tulis.
I got out of the house today, Annette and I both rushing out at the same time. She said, hey, you're tired to work. So I must let you know, if your wife cares about these things, that the David Tulis show is going off in his radio costume without a hitch, everything in perfect order, except his hair is perhaps not combed properly. And there's not much I can do about that unless I wet down my fingertips in the men's room and run my fingertips over my head. There's a story in the Seattle Times I wanted to mention to you, in thinking in terms of reform of a major abuse by the state, and that is police reform. A jury awards $250,000 to a woman traumatized when Tacoma cops didn't know the difference between the two first letters of the alphabet, A and B. Her name is Kathleen Mancini, and she was thrown to the ground at gunpoint. She was handcuffed, and then she was forced to stand barefoot in winter while the police in Tacoma raided her apartment. And in a lawsuit, she was awarded by the King County Superior Court a jury $250,000, a trial that lasted 2 weeks. I mean, the state put up a huge resistance to paying her for her vast damages from an incident that came from a confidential informant. This raid took place January the 5th, and the story came out September the 1st of this year. So we have things that are 6 years old. I mean, the wheels of justice grind slowly. Indeed, Mancini was brutalized and traumatized, says Lori Haskell in a news release. She suffers post-traumatic stress disorder, has flashbacks when seeing a uniformed officer. She feels what many black people in Chattanooga feel in their neighborhoods. They may have a gang house a couple blocks down, but they also have police cruisers going by and children coming home from school on foot. There's always danger. There's danger there. The Court of Appeals, the case was originally dismissed by a judge that incorrectly found that the city of Tacoma was immune to liability based on the public duty doctrine. So the Court of Appeals overturned that and found that the negligence claims by Miss Mancini were grounded in the common law right of the sanctity of her home, and then the case went to trial. This duty, the duty to refrain from invading a private individual's home, whether intentionally, which is a trespass, or negligently, resulting from the absence of due care, is one of common law origin, the court said, and applies to all. This is 2015. Her neighbors could not invade her home. The same is true for the city's agents. There was a 38-page opinion, and it's called a stinging rebuke to the police who knew, get this, who knew immediately that they were in the wrong apartment, but went ahead and searched it anyway. They knew it wasn't the right one. She lived in apartment 1B, while the cops' intended target was a felon with a record in apartment 1A in a different building in the same complex. And so it was wrong building, the wrong number, and the wrong person, and rightly rewarded compensation for her injuries. Go to Nooganomics.com today and read about a phenomenon across the country. I don't think it's as bad here under the leadership, the headship, if you will, of that department, Mayor Andy Burke. We have a police department in Chattanooga serving the executive branch, forced cavity searches, forced colonoscopies, forced blood draws, forced blood alcohol tests, forced DNA extractions, forced eye scans. It goes on. Forced inclusion in biometric databases. These are just a few of the ways in which people just like you are being forced to accept that we have no control over our bodies, our lives, our property, and especially when it comes to interactions with police. And you're assumed guilty until proven innocent, and you have, as Alex Wibbles, the University of Utah nurse, involved in just such a story. She said no to a blood draw of a victim. Right, the man who was unconscious was a victim of a car accident, and the officer Jeff Payne was demanding a blood draw of that person. I mean, why would there be a forced blood draw of someone who's a victim of a police chase? Right, we have again a violent police chase. The man fleeing crashes into the unconscious man, and he is the victim. He is now to be searched by blood, and the order given to Wubbles to do it. She's not cooperating, so she is under arrest. An amazing story, just an amazing story. And I think we have to get in Tennessee. We have to get to the bottom of it, and we have a call. Caller, this is David Tulis. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Mike Steele. What's really dangerous, David, is the fact that corporations, I call it corporate communism, is not compelling people, but enticing them to waive their constitutional rights, which I don't believe one can do, in order to take on a benefit. Now, all over the world, companies are now offering chips to their employees, and they're happily taking them. And let's take the insurance industry, where they've convinced the legislature to compel people to buy their product. And that's the danger. Within the next, I guarantee you, 5 years, before you are allowed to work at a particular corporation, not only will there be an E-scan to make sure you're a so-called citizen, but the corporation may even require a check, because now many companies don't give checks. You have to have direct deposit. And the next step is, well, if you don't get chipped, David, I'm sorry, you can't work for us. And then there'll be some legislation compelling you to have that chip by the state in order to receive some pretended benefit. And this is the problem. The marriage between corporations saying, sorry, David, you're voluntarily doing this, and government legislation that enforces the statute that you volunteered into. I want to hear your comment on that.
Well, Mike, I appreciate your calling, but let me hold on. Don't leave just yet. I was going to ask Mike the question about undocumented Americans. Now, he's essentially arguing that you want to be undocumented because if you're undocumented, you're free. And those people who enter into the employment realm with corporations, deal with corporations, and which are government creations, they are creatures of the government. They are state creatures. They have to obey public policy. They have to obey statute, and they are the area. I mean, he says it's corporate socialism, and that's right. But the point I wanted to get to is the idea of being undocumented. Now, you're a free person of the kind that you're implying, Mike, in your question. The free person has no documents. He exists apart from any connection with the state, apart from any connection with commerce. His Department of Commerce, which has his birth certificate, for example, the creation of his legal avatar, which has the same letters as his name, but with different styling. The styling usually is all capital letters. That is your avatar. It's not you. It is a legal fiction. It's kind of a corporation that you assume and that with which you identify as a flesh and blood human being. And the reason that people have documentation and become documented is so that they can be seen by government and seen by corporations. Caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind?
Okay, David, I know where you're going with this because you're going to try to trap me, because you know that I think we should build a fence with machine gun nests. So go ahead, try to trap me. I'm ready.
Well, go ahead. What's your argument?
Well, no, you're telling me about undocumented work.
Okay, Mike, you're making an argument that people are freer when they're less documented. And my argument about undocumented aliens, as they're called, illegals in Tennessee and Chattanooga, is that we should be for them. We should be for them, especially if they have no documents, especially if they're exercising what we would call constitutionally guaranteed, God-given, inalienable, inherent rights. These are people.
Okay, here's the question. Here's the catch-22. And that's why the Constitution said Congress has the power of naturalization. It mentioned citizenship. There's a difference.
That's right.
You are not required to give information to anybody for any reason whatsoever. As a matter of fact, you can change your name 10 times a day if you want, as long as you don't do it for fraudulent purposes. You don't have to have papers on you. None of that is required. So then the question becomes, how can the individual that has an accent be compelled to show papers? The answer is they're not. they are cunningly coerced out of their constitutional rights. And that's coming from someone that believes that if you want to take on the benefits of America, you need to voluntarily get documentation. Let's say you want to collect Social Security or some other benefit. Let's say a driver's license. Anything that the state offers over and above a natural person. But if you want to be a natural person, that is to say, come from anywhere in the world and not present documents, I don't know how anyone can stop you, because a police officer on the street can't while I'm walking down the street say, let me see your papers. Well, no, I don't have papers. Well, who are you? Well, why do you want to know? You sending me a birthday cake? You're not required to do that.
Right. If there's no probable cause.
Or reasonable suspicion to believe you've committed a crime, then they can pull you in and start questioning you. And even if at that point, you're still required or not required to reveal any information.
Go ahead. Right. We're talking here about a natural person. And the question that I'm raising for you, Mike, is since you want a border wall, you want there to be no freedom of movement, no free market in labor. You want there to be tyranny on the wall, tyranny on this imaginary line between us and Mexico. And you have the idea that somehow you have the idea that borders give totalitarian authority along lines on the map. But don't forget the border there, the end of the United States and the beginning of Mexico it should not be seen as a barrier. It should just simply be seen as a line where the authority stops, right? And that doesn't have to be tyrannical.
I agree with you, because now we're under invasion. And when a country's under invasion, they have to protect their borders. And I'm not that happy that there's not a border wall in Canada. I'd probably support that too. So first we need to protect our borders, and then
they're not out. What do you mean our borders? How is it our borders, Mike? Why our?
Together. And if it does that, we'll consider tearing it down. But we cannot have criminals just crossing into our country without some sort of regard to our laws.
Are they criminals because they don't have papers, Mike? Is that why they're criminals?
They're criminals because Congress has passed a law regarding who can be in the country and who can't. And that's constitutional. Under naturalization, the Constitution allows that.
Well,
you can't come waltzing into the country.
I don't agree with you. Go ahead.
Yeah, David, let's use our reason, logic, and common sense here. If you're going to have a country, you have to have borders, or there is no country. Because borders are legal fictions. They're statutory legal fictions. You set up a border in your country. Let's say you and I buy an island, and half the island we own, the other half we sell. Well, we've created a legal fiction, a statutory legal fiction, and we have to protect those borders, or there is no country.
The border, Mike, the border is there to show where the authority of a state ends. These are all states that have these borders, and to some extent, the authority of the federal power ends as well. But of course, the federal government has international jurisdiction and maritime jurisdiction, so its authority extends beyond the border of any state, beyond the shoreline of any state. Because there's a border doesn't mean there has to be a wall. It doesn't mean there have to be traps, machine gun nests, minefields, barbed wire, and obstacles for the free movement of people.
The problem is
who are innocent of any wrong.
A child that's gone overboard, where you didn't discipline them at first, and now all of a sudden they're doing drugs and they're robbing, they're stealing, and now you have to take their freedom away and throw them in jail. They have to hit bottom. And that's where we are in this country. The limp-wrist liberals have so disregarded the laws of America that criminals are coming into our country. People that have no business here are coming into our country.
But people who do have business are coming in too.
And now we have to go to extreme measures, like China did with keeping out Attila the Hun and build that wall. What would you suggest?
Let me ask you this, Mike. Let me ask you a question about despotism in the police state. You want there to be freedom in all the states, but you don't want there to be freedom at the border. How can you tyrannize over innocent people who are coming from Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala, innocent of any wrong? They've done nothing wrong. They just want a better life. They're crossing this imaginary line in the sand, as you described it. And now you want them to be called criminals.
I'm going to answer your fourth question, which if we're in a court of law, I'd object. But I don't care what they want. That's not my problem. I can't control what they do or don't do. My problem is my country. I don't care what the Canadians do. I don't care what the Mexicans do. I can only control our borders. We can only control our borders and our country. That they want to,
they're not our borders.
Problem.
Mike, those are not our borders. They're their borders.
What Congress has deemed to be lawful and applying here. You know, I've known people that have taken 10, 15 years to legally get in this country. They've spent thousands of dollars, that have studied, that have taken tests, that have failed and retaken tests. They shouldn't know about the history of the nation. They shouldn't know the Constitution. They shouldn't know how to speak English.
Well, go ahead. Answer. Should they should or should?
Asking you. I mean,
no, they shouldn't. No, there's no, because listen.
English, why not Mandarin Chinese?
Mike, the United States, the United States is a corporation. I'm not saying it's a corporation.
Common law of this country, they don't need to be here.
Well, I believe the free market argument, Mike, has to be that people who are innocent of any wrong, who've done nothing wrong, committed no crime, are not evil in any way, should be free to go wherever they want to go. It doesn't matter where if people speak a different language.
And you've broken law. No.
Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate your call. Thanks, Mike. The marketplace idea, my position is the classical liberal position, okay? In a way, it's anti-state. Being pro-free market, you, my listener, need to understand, it's anti, the idea of it being anti-state is that it's not against the fact that nations have their own identity, their own tongues, their own histories, but that the use of compulsion and force and violence to prevent the innocent movement of innocent people and trade, these are wrong, okay? They're wrong. And so what we have in our country is with the rising indignation at many fronts by Congress. Congress has passed innumerable laws criminalizing vast parts of the economy. Look at the civil asset forfeiture statute that Jeff Sessions, the federal prosecutor, wants to revive, and he's all for. Look at these warrantless stops hundreds of miles inland by Border Patrol people. Look at roadblocks on highways hundreds of miles inland by Border Patrol. Warrantless stops, absolutely without warrant. These are tyrannical. They're tyrannical. They're evil. They're unconstitutional. And we can only see that if we appreciate the idea of the free market, where labor is free too. And so that's why when I see a picture of the new La Paz Stacey Johnson, there's a picture of her quoted today in Chattanooga.com. I think, well, good. She's representing people who are here, they speak Spanish. They want to come to this country to have families. They want to start businesses. They want to be involved in American life. They want to take advantage of the good things here. They're innocent people. They've done nothing wrong. Mike and people like him, they're just right-wing conservatives. They want a total state. They want a total state in certain areas, and then they think they cannot have a total state in other areas. Well, guess what? We have a total state at every point. And so to object to its application against harmless, innocent Arabic and Hispanic immigrants to this country, to attack that is to attack it elsewhere. And that's what I'm trying to be, is consistent. I'm consistent. I attack the idea of oppression wherever it is. If it's at the county level, the city of Dunlap level, whether it's out of Washington, whether it's out of Nashville. There should be no injury to any harmless and innocent person who's moving from one place to the other. There should be undocumented immigrants here. There should be undocumented Americans. The problem is that Americans are almost all of them documented, and that means that they are defensive. Socialism makes you defensive, right? Socialism, it does do that. It causes prejudice. It causes envy. Everyone has to be under the thumb. If I'm under the thumb, if I have to pay these taxes, well, then everybody should too. If I have to have these papers, then everybody should too, have to as well. If I have to have a driver's license to travel in my car as a driver in transportation, well, so does everybody else. Envy works that way. Envy makes you unhappy at seeing someone who's free. It makes you jealous of someone who's outside the system, who's undocumented, who may not pay the tax, who may not pay the privilege fee, who may not beg permission. And you've gone ahead and done all that. You, my listener, have done all those things, and you become accepted. You become part of the program, right? You are an accepted person. You are not undocumented. You are documented, and in fact, you've piled the documents up, whether with your corporations, your fees, your permissions, your contracts, your all kinds of admissions, which you've made, very possibly, often in ignorance, and you've yielded something to yourself, and you've become the corporate person. You've become the person with the avatar, the person with all the welfare benefits, the Social Security, the Medicare, insurance. You travel under regulation. Everything you do is under regulation, and that's you. And most of us are like that, right? Most people whom you know are exactly in that category, and you don't know any free people. I happen to know a few free people, and I've made an effort to try to meet free people who are from other countries and who are here speaking Spanish. And I'm still trying to meet them, and I hope I can hear their stories. And that's what we are interested in here on the David Tulis Show, is the idea of liberty and the idea of making our way apart from the protection, the guarantees, the safety of security, right? The safety of the security state, which is all around us and which is rising and rising and rising. How are we going to have freedom for ourselves, freedom from body cavity searches, and yet we want an absolute tyranny on the border? How do we expect that's possible? I think to suppose that that's possible is simply living in a dreamland, and I really don't want to be part of that. I want to be someone who is very realistic. And so I would say, if we have to have an opinion on strangers in this country, we should say they're here innocently, they're here harmlessly, they've done no wrong, they've committed no crime, they've injured no person, and they just don't have the proper papers. Well, the federal power has no authority anyway in that to begin with, despite what Mike Steele says. And so there's no sin in being undocumented. There's no sin in being outside the system. And that's what free market's all about. That's what local economy is all about. And I hope my program here at the David Tulis Show gives you food for thought in this direction. I'm a classical liberal, and I'm at odds. I'm at odds with Republicans. I'm at odds with conservatives, and I'm at odds with any kind of nationalist. Most people, whether Desjardins, whether Corker, whether Perdue, whether Alexander, they're all nationalists. I'm not a nationalist. I'm in a way, I'm a localist. I'm apart from that whole scheme, apart from that whole argument, and would say that we want to be free and we want to be prosperous. And these two gifts are more likely apart from the nation state, apart from the civil authority in Washington, and that in Nashville. That's my argument. Love your neighbor and buy local. And I think there are 5 fruits of Christianity, and the gospel argument of sovereign grace, free grace for God's people, and benefits for all, right? Because of their connection with God's people in trading, in being in the same city as, and so on. There are many benefits for those who don't care anything about God, don't know about God, just being around people who are Christians. The fruit of Christianity is that near is better than far, that small is better than big, that simple is better than complex. And down in the footnotes, where even there the good people will wrangle with us and take their sword from the scabbard, even there, personal is better than corporate, and physical is better than abstract. And I brought you today by Nooganomics.com, the website for men who matters, Nooganomics.com, proposing a 50% tax cut to get people to think about what a tax increase for county schools means. Let's have a tax cut of 50% rather than laying out another $400 million for a wrecked and disaster-ridden system. David Tulis, Big Radio.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports